Hello, and welcome back to another We Ourselves video. Today I want to talk about the first two episodes of Loki Season 2. First, I like to say that I'm glad that Season 2 of Loki has arrived. I was a big fan of the first season. I've watched all of the Marvel live-action TV shows, and of all of them, Loki has been the show that I have gone back and rewatched the episodes the most. WandaVision and Hawkeye are a close second and third. I really love the music for Loki, I love the aesthetics and the feel of the show, and I like the slight wackiness at times, as well as the immense consequences of everything that happened within the season. I also thought the two main characters, Mobius and Loki, had good character interactions. I think Tom Hiddleston and Owen Wilson are colleagues and friends in real life, and that really comes through with their performances in the first season. And I'm happy to say that the same thing is happening in the second season so far. I feel that they are building on their characters' relationships within this slice of the MCU. That being said, I want to move on to the first episode of Loki Season 2. Now, right here before I go on, I want to say that I'm not going into a deep dive and talk about all the Easter eggs and all the hidden things that are inside of each episode. There are plenty of excellent breakdown videos out there that do a very nice job of that for the diehard fans. My comments are my surface level reactions to the Loki series as a fan of the MCU Loki and the previous season. Also, spoiler alerts, if you haven't watched the first two episodes, please go and watch them before continuing with this video. So let's get into the first episode entitled Ouroboros. It was nice to see the aftermath of what happened in the last season. We pick up exactly where we left off, although I must say that the statue of Kang looks a little different than it did in the previous season. If we go back and look, we see that the Kang statue is actually standing against some kind of building or pillar. But when we come to this new season, the Kang statue seems to be freestanding and slightly different in terms of the material that makes it up. We see that Loki is time slipping, which means he's going back and forth along the TVA timeline. When he was first sent here by Sylvie in the last season, he comes back to the TVA after the rule of the Council of Kangs, but before He Who Remains has created the Timekeepers and hidden himself from public view. I want to pause right here and talk about my theories about Kang the Conqueror and He Who Remains. I don't believe that the statue we see here belongs to He Who Remains. Jonathan Major has done a very good job of portraying Kang the Conqueror and He Who Remains. I know there are a lot of theories that He Who Remains is the person that Kang the Conqueror eventually becomes, but I disagree. In my opinion, they are two different variants of Kang because their personalities are so different. There's no way that Kang the Conqueror would ever go into hiding and create fake timekeepers or three space lizards, as Loki liked to call them, to rule everything. That's not his personality. I think the reason why He Who Remains was able to weaponize Goliath with no other Kang stopping him is because He Who Remains seemed non-threatening, and he was probably very quiet and very sneaky. I wouldn't be surprised if we find out that he worked with Kang the Conqueror to overthrow the Council of Kangs. And then, when the time came, because he's really good at appearing non-threatening, he turned on Kang the Conqueror and also eliminated his timeline. And at that point, because of his extreme introverted personality, and therefore not wanting to be in front of people, and instead he wanted to hide out in his citadel at the end of time, he created the fictional timekeepers and Miss Minutes to oversee the daily operations of the TVA. We actually learn this about Miss Minutes in this very episode. I can see a variant like He Who Remains seeing the potential of Goliath, a creature that the other Kangs clearly ignored, and spending his time developing it into a weapon to destroy the timelines and guard his lonely private citadel. Despite what our extrovert-oriented culture likes to believe, and we creators often write into extroverted main characters, it is the introverts who tend to be more methodical and plotting as opposed to being flashy in what they do. That's He Who Remains. But anyway, that's my 2 cents on the Kang the Conqueror and He Who Remains being 2 different variants of Kang. The show begins with Mobius and the Hunters attempting to catch Loki while he begins uncontrollably warping across time in their headquarters. In the present, Loki reunites with Mobius and warns him about the threat posed by variants of He Who Remains. After a heated conference with the new judge and Mobius and B-15, TVA General Dox has a team of TVA hunters arm themselves supposedly to find Sylvie, who they think caused the sacred timeline to branch after killing He Who Remains. But again, I want to pause here to say that if you go back to the episode and watch it, He Who Remains told Sylvie and Loki while they were still arguing,
"He's a liar, Loki."
So am I. And I don't think he was lying.
Better hurry. Timeline's already branching.
So what are you suggesting?
and we actually have that effect scene where you see the timeline branching. In fact, things were changed for He Who Remains even before they really started arguing. You have that shot where he confesses to them that he doesn't know what's going to happen going forward. And now a lot of people who always said that Sylvie caused the timeline to branch by killing him, they are now coming around to believe that He Who Remains had this all planned out and this is how it was going to go anyway. So let's continue. Loki and Mobius meet TVA technician Ouroboros, or Obi, who speculates that Loki is time slipping, a phenomenon caused by branching timelines dangerously overloading the temporal loom. To save Loki, Obi instructs Mobius to approach the temporal loom with the temporal aura extractor device to pull Loki from the time stream. All Loki has to do is prune himself from all branched timelines. Before he could do that, Loki time slips to the future where the TVA is being evacuated as the loom goes critical. There, he encounters Sylvie before he is pruned by someone at the last minute. In the present, Mobius successfully pulls Loki from the time stream and they set out to find Sylvie. And finally, in a mid-credit scene, Sylvie enters a branch timeline in Broxton, Oklahoma, 1982, and visits a McDonald's restaurant. And we can see that she, for the first time, is going to be able to live a regular life. On to episode 2, Breaking Brad. Loki, Mobius, and Hunter B-15 find and capture Hunter X5 in London, 1977 on the Sacred Timeline, where he lives as film actor Brad Wolfe. I had questions at once. Is this his actual life on the timeline? If so, what happened to the real him, since X5 as a hunter was by definition a variant? The show doesn't explain, and this is one of many questions that bothered me about this episode. I'll explain in a minute. Under interrogation, X5 admits to abandoning General Dox's mission and reveals Sylvie's location. This scene is an obvious callback to Mobius interrogation scenes with Loki from season 1. The group travels to Oklahoma and finds Sylvie working in a McDonald's. Loki tries to remind her of their last encounter in the TVA's future, but she refuses to involve herself with the organization at first. Meanwhile, back at the TVA, Obi attempts to repair the loom to safely accommodate the branching timelines, but discovers he can't open the doors because they are coded to He Who Remains temporal aura. Mobius finally convinces Wolfe to reveal why he's so nervous. Their group is in mortal danger. Sylvie enchants Wolfe, forcing him to reveal Dox's plan to simultaneously destroy all branching timelines. After returning Wolfe to custody, Loki, Mobius, and Sylvie capture Dox, but she has largely succeeded and most of her allies have escaped. In the TVA, B-15 and the others watch as Dox's plan destroys the branch timelines, killing billions of people. As TVA receptionist Casey tracks the rogue Ravonna Renslayer's TemPad on one of the remaining branching timelines, Sylvie, refusing to be involved any further, returns to McDonald's with He Who Remains TemPad still in her possession. My overall impressions of the first 2 episodes? Despite all the callbacks to the other movies and the previous season of Loki, I thought overall these 2 episodes were less impactful than the first 2 episodes of season 1. There seems to be far less happening, and when things do happen, they are resolved rather quickly. Loki time skipping was resolved quick. Now, there was a good lead up to it, The scene was dramatic, but the very quick resolution of the problem was a little bit of a letdown for me. For example, in that first episode, we're told that Loki has to violently prune himself from all the other timelines. But we only see him pruned once, and that's all it takes for him to snap to Mobius's location at the time loom, and then it's over. It seemed just a little anticlimactic for all the nice special effects and build up to it. And we see the same thing happening in episode 2 with General Dox's plan. We have long takes and long delivery of dialogue, but one of the biggest callbacks that could have really shown how much the characters have developed was missed. We are dumped right into the mission to find Sylvie, but in order to find her, Mobius and Loki decided to find X5, who we are told, not shown by the way, is one of the top hunters, but for some reason, he's living out a life on the sacred timeline now. It feels like we're missing 2 to 3 scenes. And the thing that I feel they really should have done as a callback is to have a mission briefing, just like they had in episode 2 of season 1. In episode 2 of the first season, we see that Loki is part of a team that's going to go and try to find this other variant of himself, or Sylvie as we find out. But before we go, Loki and the audience is given a mission briefing, which serves to prepare us to see variants of Loki. We also see that Mobius is using Loki. Loki thinks he's going to use all of the TVA, and B-15 doesn't trust Loki at all and would rather prune him. If we had another callback briefing like this in season 2, episode 2, it would have been an excellent callback and it would have served more than one purpose. First, it would have crystallized the changes in all of these characters and reminded us of the journey we had gone on with Loki. Second, what a scene like that could have done for us was provide needed exposition to let us know what the hell is going on. The last time we saw X5 in the previous episode, it was our first introduction to him. Now suddenly he's found Sylvie, had a conversation with her, and then he decided he was going to abandon Dox's mission and live out a life on the sacred timeline. And before anyone accuses me of being too hard on X5, I just want to say this. Loki Season 1 showed us how to develop a story arc for a hunter. Look at what happened with B-15. She begins the series totally dedicated to her job. She opposed Mobius's desire to use Loki and just wanted to prune him. But when a fellow hunter is taken, she begins to have some doubts. And then she's enchanted by Sylvie and has glimpses of a life on the sacred timeline. That further eroded her confidence in her mission until she asked Sylvie to show her the truth. B-15's emotional reaction to discovering that she was happy on the sacred timeline was powerful. And by the end of the season, she's sure of who she is and where she is, and she confronts Ravonna in a very strong scene. But we don't get any kind of comparable characterization for X5 in this series so far. I don't know if they're going to develop his character further, but in the brief time that we've had with him, it felt disjointed to me. The X5 in the first episode is not the same X5, in my opinion, who takes over the interrogation and turns it back on Mobius and Loki. To me, that's disjointed character development when you compare it to B-15's development in Loki Season 1. So much happened off screen between episodes 1 and 2 that was actually confusing and unbelievable that they didn't give us any of this information. Having a briefing scene, apart from giving us characterization and showing us how much these characters have changed, it would have provided needed exposition to let us know what was happening. In episode 1 of season 1 of Loki, we saw the aftermath of what Sylvie was doing. We saw Mobius investigating one of the crime scenes. We actually saw Sylvie take out a team of hunters. And then in the very next episode, we see her setting all the charges. The episode actually begins with her taking out another team of hunters. The audience is giving pieces of what she is doing before we actually meet her. And then we get the full explanation in episode 3. But here in season 2 with General Dox, we have just as big of an operation going on, but we aren't given any information. By the time Loki and the gang arrive at Dox's location, they're already well into doing what they were doing, and we didn't get any cutaways or nothing similar to the setup with Sylvie from season 1. And it left me disappointed. And it left me a little worried because this change in the storytelling reminded me of how the writers of the Ahsoka series did the same thing. Like Ahsoka, the first 2 episodes go in for long character moments when they needed to move the plot along. X5 is a totally new character, and going from being a guard and fellow hunter that's criticizing Mobius in the first episode to one who's living out his life on a sacred timeline felt totally rushed to me. That's a hell of a lot to happen off screen between 2 episodes. General Dox is also a new character, but we don't see any of the setup at this new location. I don't understand why they decided to skip all of those things as if they're not necessary. So even though I like the first 2 episodes and I look forward to seeing where the season is going, I'm just a little concerned that the showrunners are depending on the audience to do too much backfilling when it doesn't need to happen. When you look at the amount of ground that is traveled in the first 2 episodes of season 1, and then you look at season 2, the difference is very stark. So anyway, that's my take on the first 2 episodes of Loki Season 2. I still like the series, the actors, and the premise, and I look forward to reviewing the next episode.